Nuwe regulasies stel onder meer voor dat sekere digitale inhoud eers aan die film- en publikasieraad voorgelê moet word voor dit op die internet kan verskyn. Baie mense is bekommerd dat dit vryheid van spraak kan inperk. Nicholas Hall is 'n kenner van digitale reg en uitvoerende hoof van Interactive Entertainment South Africa. Nicholas, welcome to the show. Why does government want these new regulations enacted?
So the regulations are to the Films and Publications Act, and that governs the jurisdiction of the Films and Publications Board. And they're basically the government body that's responsible for classifying some content, specifically films, games, and what is considered other publications, which is a whole host of things. Now, traditionally, they've only been able to classify content that's been physically distributed, so games that are sold in stores, films that you see, say, on at movie theaters or DVDs, and they're the people responsible for giving those that media age classifications. But with the shift to sort of the digital age, increasingly a lot more of that content is being consumed online. And so, rightly so, I think, the amendment bill was put in place to increase the Films and Publications jurisdiction to start being able to regulate some online content. The concern is that they've maybe gone too far.
In which way? For example, if I produce a weekly commentary on the news that I put on my own YouTube channel, would I have to submit that to the FPB first, or would I be able to join the press club and slip through the loophole?
So this is where this is, I think, the biggest point of concern is that they've dealt with what we could say is user-generated content very poorly. Now, in briefings and in the parliamentary submission process, they were quite clear that they said that they're not interested in classifying user-generated content, but that's not what the Act says, and certainly not what the regulations envisage. They talk about commercial online distributors needing to register with the Films and Publications Board, and then those commercial online distributors needing to submit everything that they publish onto the internet to the FPB for classification. So it's not just, I need to get my YouTube channel or my videos that are posted onto YouTube. The current regulations would say, if you're registered with them as a regulator, you need to register everything. So if you make any tweets, if you submit anything to, say, TikTok or Facebook, that would need to go through the classification process first. And the big issue is that commercial online distributors are undefined. And given how most of these social media networks operate, I mean, if you put ads on your content, and you might not even have that option, and you start earning even a fraction of an income, 1 cent, are you now all of a sudden a commercial online distributor that now needs to register? And they haven't answered that question adequately. And the hope is that in the regulations, which have now been published for comment, is that they would deal with it, but it's notably absent.
So, Nicholas, in your view, is this just sloppy lawmaking or malice?
I think it is a bit of sloppy lawmaking in that there's been numerous comments made by the public through the whole process, both when the amendment bill was made. So before we even got to the regulations, there was a whole years-long process that was dealing with the amendment to the actual act, which empowered the FPB to make these regulations. And during that process, these issues were raised, and they were never adequately dealt with. And now that we've come to the regulations, they're still not being dealt with. And again, the FPB is very quick to say, we're not interested in this content. We're not going to do it. But they're not prepared, or at least it seems they're not prepared to put that commitment down into writing. A good example is in the Act, there is a definition of non-commercial online distributor, which is never used. It's used once in one of the exemptions to say that if you publish something that's not a film or a game, and you're a non-commercial online distributor, then you can follow the ISPA process to get that content taken down. But there's nothing there about exemption or a lessening of the fines or the criminality. And this is the big issue, is that there's some very severe criminal punishment if you don't comply with these regulations. Failure to register could lead to an 8-month prison sentence and a fine of up to 150,000 Rand. And that similar penalties apply if you fail to get content classified. And again, you can see the intent, you can kind of see what they're trying to do, but it's been very poorly drafted. And the big concern is that they really haven't been taking into consideration what the public has submitted. But Nicholas, we're still waiting for that process to finish.
Nicholas,
So
two
they have one more
questions.
chance.
The one is about the vulnerability of these regulations to political abuse. And the other question is the capacity of the FPB to sift through potentially hundreds of thousands of pieces of online content and presumably assess them in, within a reasonable period of time to have them published. So political vulnerability for abuse and capacity.
So definitely, my biggest concern with these regulations is that they're ripe for abuse. And again, this is why the concern is if the FPB isn't interested in regulating user-generated content, then they need to put those exemptions in there. But currently, as it stands, is they may not, for the moment at least, start trying to classify user-generated or content that's generally put online. They may just be targeting Netflix. But the law allows them now to go after anybody who publishes anything on the internet. And we've already seen the FPB used as a tool for political fighting when a couple of years ago, for example, they took down The Spear, which was an artwork in a gallery that depicted the former President Jacob Zuma in a less than flattering way. And the FPB had the power to take that picture down from a private art gallery. And I can guarantee you that if the opportunity arises, this administration or a future administration would use the powers that this legislation gives them to take down content that they're not happy with, and that's my very big concern.
So, Nicholas, presuming that there are viewers who agree with you, how can this be stopped?
Well, unfortunately, the way for that process has passed. The act has been signed into law. We're just waiting on a commencement date from the president. The regulations have been published for public comment, but that deadline has also closed. It's since stopped. It was closed on the 17th of August, and now we wait. The next step, if this does progress and the regulations don't adequately deal with the issues that we've raised, is to then challenge not only the regulations but the act as a whole, because I feel that there's a very strong case to say that the entire act is in fact unconstitutional.
Well, I hope somebody with deep pockets is listening. Nicholas, thank you very, very much.